Hey everybody, okay, so we're just wrapping up Unit 3 here. I'll get us into our due dates list. So I'm recording this on Thursday morning, which means we have that Thursday noon deadline for all the major work, quizzes, the paragraph, whatever. There is a reply component, so we do have that till the end of the day for those, but most of the major work, or all the major work, is due then Thursday, Feb 2nd, and turn around fairly quickly into our next unit again. We move pretty fast. It's the 8-week format, kind of hard to avoid. Okay, so let's see here. As I said before, then Unit 3, writing the paragraph is our first, I wouldn't say major in scope writing assignment because it's not really long, but it's definitely our first kind of more formal writing assignment where we do want to begin to put some of the composition ideas that we're learning into practice, attend to citation and stuff like that. And again, your go-to for citation questions is this MLA citation link over here in our main course menu. You can find examples in Unit 3 that was more specific to that assignment, and you'll find those duplicated in the citation link here, but there's other resources that we'll want to return to as we move through the course. So that brings us to Unit 4, where we continue working with the story flight patterns and adding a few more of the kind of like composition or writing elements into what we're doing. So you'll find first a review kind of looking backwards at the paragraph assignment from Unit 3, some common mistakes. So as far as the grading goes, again, like I've said before, always keep the grading just in terms of the point value. Don't translate it in your mind to a percent or a letter grade because it sort of skews your perception of how well or how poorly you might have done. And especially for something that's not tons and tons of points like the paragraph assignment, I don't tend to, make a distinction between like let's say a 34 points out of, or versus like 33 points versus 32. You know, I can't sort of cut it that finely, or it's not worth the time for you or for me to try to parse it that finely. So I usually keep it in kind of like 5 chunks. So if we go back to the assignment itself really quickly, you would have seen that the scoring is described down here. So keep in mind, again, 30 out of that entire 1,000, so we're not talking huge make or break. It's just a chance to practice some skills and hopefully get them right, but if you get them wrong, you do so in a kind of like a really low stakes way, and then you learn from that mistake. So I'm unlikely to give like a 37, a 38. The difference between those two paragraphs is so marginal that it just becomes impossible. So again, if you have pretty much everything in place, you've done a good job, obviously plot, replies, stuff like that, we're looking at 30 points. If you have a couple typos or citation mistakes or just other things that aren't kind of up to snuff, probably a 25. And then, of course, as the mistakes get a little bit more severe or more, impactful on you communicating the message, or you're just not following, right, the assignment, then we're talking like 20 out of 30 and below. But again, I don't parse it out so you get a 28 or a 27 or whatever the case might be. 30, 25, 20, right, and then down the line. So when it comes to grading, again, the difference between a 30 and a 25 paragraph are really like pretty minimal in some cases. Even though if you do the math, and that's why I say don't do the math, the difference between those percentages or letter grades seems really huge, but that's artificial. So always just keep it in terms of the points, right? And then back to our current unit, where the first thing we do is look backwards at some of those common mistakes. Again, if you got like a 25, let's say, it's probably because you have some of these minor errors, not just one of them like a little accidental typo, but consistent problems throughout. Maybe they're with citation or, just basic stuff like that. Too many typos, so not just one, but a whole series of them. The work looks rushed, it's not well developed, that kind of stuff. So definitely take a look through your work, compare it then to the common mistakes here, and see if you might have made any of those. Okay, and then we move on to Unit 4 itself, where here we are looking at a sample student essay, which is by no means perfect, and you'll notice some formatting differences just because of the time period it was written in versus what we're doing. But we're kind of reading it for like the tone, for the scope of it, for how it functions as the type of essay that we're composing in our composition class. Okay, so it's provided here as a PDF. There's some notes for things to look for, and again, you kind of like, it's almost like training your ear to hear what kinds of tone we've got and what kind of sentences and how the paragraphs work together and all that kind of stuff. There's a short quiz, again, just drawing your attention more to these kinds of things. There's just some text stuff, not super interesting, but obviously important stuff for us in terms of our composition course about thesis statements, you know, how do we make an argument for the type of essay that we're writing. The writing process, again, just some text to read through and to think about. And when it comes to the writing process, like I kind of summarize here, there's really no one process that will be the perfect one for everybody. But everybody does have a process. So it's important that you are, like I say here, you're just aware of having a process, even if you've never actively thought about it. And sometimes I think students often, they have a process that's not really working because they never thought about it. So they invest a lot of time and energy into producing a piece of writing, and it doesn't necessarily get the grade that reflects that investment of effort. So there's a sort of disjunction between the effort you put forward and the grade that you get. And I think sometimes the problem is really in the writing process. So it's useful to take a step back and think about what is the process you have in place for writing an essay, or even the short paragraph, for example. Do you just get the assignment and start writing immediately? For an essay, you know, maybe you can kind of pull that off, or have in the past, but as the essays get longer, as the prompts get more complicated, as the research gets more involved, it becomes more and more difficult to do that successfully. And even if you can do it successfully, it's often way more stressful than it really needs to be. So one of the ironies when it comes to the writing process is not that there's just, you know, one that everyone should use, but that often adding steps effectively, right, intentionally to your process can shorten the time, can make it more efficient. So you're adding things to what you're doing, but actually making the overall process right shorter or more efficient, and certainly less stressful. And so sometimes just a little bit of planning, whether it's an outline, right, making some notes about like certain quotes that you want to use, or organization and that kind of stuff. So you're adding a step. You're not getting right to the step where you're writing the essay itself. But once you do get to that point, you can do it much more efficiently. So again, kind of counterintuitive that we add steps to the process to make it shorter. And if not shorter, then at least more efficient, and I would hope a little less stressful. So especially as we get up to our first essay, and particularly for our last one, which is a little bit more involved and, you know, challenges you to use more sources, definitely think about process, and do you need to add some steps or move them around, or especially do some more upfront planning to make the writing part a little more effective. Okay, a quick reading, the elements of the essay from our textbook here, a short quiz. Again, pretty low point value. It's really just designed to draw your attention to some important points that are being made here. And then we return to flight patterns and a discussion board here. So the piece of the puzzle that we're fitting in here is really not just like an analyzing the story. It's an exercise in close reading. So that means, can you formulate an idea, but then support it with evidence from a text, which is very much like what we did in the paragraph in in Unit 3. But all of these questions are kind of asking you to think deeply about this text, generate some ideas about it, some interpretations, some theories about it, but then to try to ground those in specifics. So again, there's a series of questions to ask here, or to answer, I should say. You can do them in just one discussion board post, but make sure you develop a paragraph, more or less, for each of the questions. So paragraph for this one, paragraph for this one, for this one. Since we're attaching a picture here, again, make sure that shows up in your post, not just as an attached file that we would have to click to see. We want to see it right there. And again, the discussion board set up so that there is a reply piece. It's off my screen capture to the bottom here, but you'll see it when you get into Blackboard. Okay, so lots of material to work through in Unit 4, so make sure you're getting in there early, managing your time effectively, and keep in mind two things. First of all, again, as we get more and more grades coming in, their relative point value versus that full 1,000 in the course, so we don't want to get too hung up on, is it a 25 out of 30? Is it a 26 out of 30? Like, that's we're not going to have that argument. It's not worth anybody's time. And keep in mind how all of these pieces that we're gathering here, whether it's about thesis statements, writing process, finding evidence in a text to support an idea, how those are all pieces that we're gathering, working towards our first essay assignment that'll come in a couple of units, but really because of the speed that we go, not that far away. So as always, if you have questions or concerns, be in touch with me, and I will talk with everybody soon.